Hey guys! Tonight we begin with the world of weird medieval world laws. The kind of laws that sound ridiculous today, but in the context of castles, plagues, and chronic bad hygiene actually made sense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The morning doesn't begin with sunlight. It begins with a sound. A bell, slow, heavy, echoing across the village like it has all the time in the world. You don't. You open your eyes, not because you're well rested, but because the bell says you are. Your back aches. Your neck complains. The straw beneath you has shifted into something that feels less like bedding and more like a polite suggestion of comfort. Somewhere inside it, something small scurries away, offended that you've disturbed its night. You don't investigate. It's better not to know. You sit up slowly, brushing bits of straw from your clothes, which are also your sleeping clothes, and your working clothes, and, if things go well, your dying clothes. Efficiency. The air is cold in that very specific way that makes you question all your life choices, including being born in a time period where insulation is more of a rumor than a reality. You take a breath. Immediately regret it. The room smells like smoke, damp wood, old stew, and humanity doing its best under difficult circumstances. Which is to say, not great. Still, it's home. Or at least, it's the place you are legally required to exist in. You stand, stretching just enough to convince your body to cooperate, and step onto the dirt floor. It's uneven. Slightly damp. Possibly alive in places. Again, better not to know. Across the room, someone coughs. You won't have time to worry about anything else. And there's always something else. You move toward the door, pushing it open with a soft creak that sounds louder than it should, as if the house itself is announcing your departure to anyone who might care. Outside, the village is already awake. Not because people want to be, but because the bell said so. Life here isn't guided by preference. It's guided by sound. Bells for waking. Bells for working. Bells for praying. Bells for stopping. Bells for reminding you that your time, every moment of it, belongs to something larger, louder, and far less negotiable than your personal comfort. You step into the morning light. Or what passes for it. The sky is a pale gray, like it hasn't fully committed to the day yet. The ground beneath your feet is a careful blend of mud, straw, and the consequences of living closely with both animals and other humans. You walk anyway. Because standing still doesn't improve anything. Around you, people move in slow, familiar patterns. No one rushes. There's no point. The day will be long no matter how quickly you start it. A woman carries water, her steps careful, measured. A man adjusts a tool that looks older than both of you combined. A child chases something that might be a chicken, or might be a personal ambition. It's hard to tell. No one looks particularly happy. But no one looks surprised either. This is just how things are. You pass by a small group gathered near the center of the village. They're talking quietly, glancing occasionally toward a figure dressed just slightly better than everyone else. That's all it takes. Slightly better fabric. Slightly cleaner edges. Slightly more confidence in the way they stand. Authority, in the Middle Ages, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just, better stitching. You don't stop to listen. Not because you're not curious. But because curiosity is a luxury, and you have a schedule to keep. Not your schedule. The schedule. The one dictated by bells, laws, traditions, and the unspoken understanding that stepping out of line, literally or figuratively, tends to end badly. You continue walking, your boots doing their best against the mud. They're practical. Durable. Entirely lacking in flair. Which is exactly how they're supposed to be. Because somewhere, in a place far cleaner than this, someone decided that what you wear should reflect who you are. And more importantly, who you are not allowed to be. You glance down at your clothes. Wool. Rough. Functional. About as fashionable as a sack of potatoes, which, coincidentally, would probably feel similar if worn long enough. You adjust the sleeve absent-mindedly. And for just a moment, a very small, very human moment. You imagine something different. Something softer. Brighter. Less itchy. Maybe a bit of color. Maybe a trim. Maybe something that says, I exist, rather than, I comply. It's a nice thought. A dangerous one. Because in this world, clothing isn't just about comfort or expression. It's about law. And laws, here, have a way of turning small dreams into very real problems. You keep walking. Because today, like every day, is less about what you want. And more about what you're allowed to do without consequences. The bell rings again in the distance. Not loudly. Not urgently. Just enough to remind you. You're already behind. You slow your pace slightly. Not because you're tired. But because someone ahead of you has made a mistake. It's subtle. Almost impressive, really. A strip of color, deep, rich, unmistakably out of place, catches your eye like a whisper that's too loud to ignore. Red. Not the faded, uncertain red of cheap dye. No, this is bold. Confident. The kind of red that doesn't belong in mud. The kind of red that belongs to someone who doesn't step in it. You're not the only one who notices. Heads turn. Not dramatically. No one gasps. No one points. That would be rude. And in this world, people rarely need to be rude when they can simply, remember. The man wearing it, because of course it's a man, keeps walking, shoulders just a little too straight, like he's trying to convince the world that he belongs inside that color. That it belongs on him. It doesn't. And everyone knows it. You feel it in the air. That quiet shift, the almost invisible tightening of the space around him. No one says anything. Not yet. Because the Middle Ages has a very particular way of handling these things. First, it notices. Then, it remembers. And eventually, it responds. You lower your gaze instinctively. Not out of guilt. But out of experience. Because attention, unwanted attention, is rarely a good thing. Especially when it comes from people who enforce rules you didn't write, can't change, and definitely don't benefit from. You adjust your own sleeve again. Wool. Still scratchy. Still safe. Still exactly what you're supposed to be wearing. Because in this world, fabric isn't just fabric. It's a boundary. A line drawn not on the ground, but on your body. And crossing that line, even by accident, has consequences. You reach the edge of the small marketplace. If marketplace is the right word. It's less a market and more a collection of things happening in the same place at the same time. A few stalls. Some baskets. A goat that seems more confident than most people here. And fabric. Always fabric. Rough bolts of wool stacked in muted shades, brown, gray, the occasional tired beige that looks like it gave up halfway through being a color. You run your fingers across one as you pass. It's coarse. Reliable. Unambitious. Exactly like your future. Nearby, a merchant is speaking in low tones to a woman who looks far more interested than she should be. He lifts something carefully, almost reverently. A small piece of cloth. It catches the light differently. Soft. Smooth. Dangerous. Silk. You don't need to get closer to know. You've never touched it, not really. But you've heard enough. Heard how it feels. How it moves. How it whispers instead of scratching. The woman hesitates. Not because she doesn't want it. But because she understands what wanting it means. The merchant leans in slightly, lowering his voice even more. This isn't just a sale. It's a risk. Because silk, in this world, is not just expensive. It's restricted. Reserved. Controlled. There are rules, very specific rules, about who can wear what. And those rules are not suggestions. They are not guidelines. They are law. You've heard them before. Everyone has. They're repeated often enough that they don't even feel like information anymore. They feel like gravity. Unavoidable. Unquestioned. If you're a peasant, you wear wool. If you're slightly better than a peasant, you wear better wool. If you're wealthy, truly wealthy, then, and only then, do the softer fabrics start to appear. Silk. Velvet. Fur trimmed in ways that suggest your life has never involved mud. And then there are the colors. That's where things get particular. Because color, in the Middle Ages, is power. Bright colors mean expensive dyes. Expensive dyes mean wealth. And wealth, visible, undeniable wealth, is something the upper classes prefer to keep clearly visible. To themselves. Purple. Absolutely not. That belongs to royalty. Not well off. Not comfortable. Royalty. The kind of people whose problems are solved by other people. You wearing purple would be less of a fashion choice. And more of a statement. A very short-lived statement. Even certain furs are restricted. Ermine. Soft. White. Impossibly clean. The kind of fur that says, I have never worked a day in my life, and I never will. Also illegal for you. Not because you couldn't technically wear it. But because you shouldn't. Because if you did, you might look like someone you're not. And that is the real problem. You glance back toward the man in red. He's still there. Still walking. Still pretending everything is normal. But now, there's someone else. A figure approaching from the side. Calm. Measured. Dressed not extravagantly, but correctly. Which, in many ways, is more powerful. They don't rush. They don't shout. They simply step into his path. And suddenly, the entire marketplace becomes very interested in not looking directly at what's happening. You turn slightly, just enough to see without being seen seeing. There's a conversation. Quiet. Firm. The kind of conversation where one person explains something. And the other realizes they already understand. The man looks down at his sleeve. That same bold red. It doesn't look as confident anymore. Now it looks exposed. Like it's been caught doing something it shouldn't. Which, of course, it has. You don't hear the exact words. You don't need to. You've heard versions of this before. A reminder. A warning. Maybe a fine. Maybe something worse, depending on how far he's pushed things before. Because these laws aren't just about clothing. They're about order. About making sure everyone can be identified at a glance. Who works? Who rules? Who matters? And who doesn't? The man nods. Once. Twice. The red sleeve suddenly seems heavier on him, like it's not just fabric anymore. Like it's evidence. He turns and walks away. Faster now. Less confident. The color still bright. But somehow diminished. The figure watches him go, then continues on, as if nothing unusual has happened. Because, to them, Nothing has. You exhale slowly. You hadn't realized you were holding your breath. Around you, the marketplace resumes its quiet rhythm. The goat is still confident. The wool is still scratchy. The silk is still being whispered about. And you. You are still exactly where you're supposed to be. Dressed exactly how you're supposed to be dressed. Living a life that fits you like your clothes. Rough. Restrictive. And very carefully measured. For a moment, just a small one, you imagine what it would be like to ignore it. To wear what you want. To choose color over caution. Comfort over compliance. To walk through the village not as who you are, but as who you could pretend to be. It's a tempting thought. Brief. Fleeting. Because in this world, pretending has consequences. And those consequences have a way of finding you. Eventually. The bell rings again. Closer this time. More insistent. Not angry. Just, expectant. There's work to be done. Rules to follow. Lines to stay within. You turn away from the silk. From the color. From the possibility. And step back into your place in the world. Dressed appropriately. Safely. Invisibly. The day doesn't end when you're finished. It ends when the bell decides it does. You feel it before you hear it. That subtle shift in the air, the way conversations begin to soften, movements become just slightly more urgent, as if everyone is quietly racing something they can't see but fully understand. The light is fading. Not dramatically. Just slowly enough that you almost don't notice, until you do. The sky, which never quite committed to brightness, now begins its gradual retreat into gray, then darker gray, then something closer to night. You're still working. Of course you are. There's always something left to do. Something unfinished. Something that could be done better, faster, longer. If only time belonged to you. It doesn't. You straighten up, pressing a hand into your lower back. It aches in a familiar way. Not sharp. Not alarming. Just constant. Like a quiet reminder that your body is part of the system, and the system expects it to keep going. Around you, others are doing the same. Tools slow. Voices lower. No one needs to say anything. You're all waiting. And then. The bell. It doesn't ring quickly. It doesn't need to. Each toll is slow, deliberate, heavy enough to settle into your chest. 1. Pause. Another. Pause. It echoes across the village, through wood and mud and narrow paths. Slipping into every open space and reminding every living thing that the day is over. Not finished. Just, over. You stop what you're doing. Immediately. Not because you want to. But because you should. Because everyone does. Because not stopping would feel wrong. Like continuing to speak after a conversation has clearly ended. Around you, people begin to move. Faster now. Not running, but close enough that the difference doesn't matter. Doors open. Tools are gathered. Children are called. The entire village shifts inward, like something pulling itself together before the dark fully arrives. You join them. Your steps quicken as you make your way back. The path is uneven, familiar, and already harder to see. The light is slipping away faster now, as if the bell has given it permission to leave. A faint breeze moves through the narrow spaces between buildings, carrying with it the smell of smoke, damp earth, and something faintly uneasy. Night isn't just darkness here. It's risk. You reach your door and step inside, closing it behind you with more care than usual. The room greets you the same way it always does. Dim. Smoky. Crowded with the quiet evidence of living. In the center, the hearth glows softly. A small, contained fire. Warm. Comforting. Dangerous. You move toward it. Slowly. Because this is the part that matters. The part that isn't optional. The part that the bell was really about. Cover your fire. You've heard the phrase your entire life. So often that it doesn't even sound like a sentence anymore. It's just a rule. Simple. Unavoidable. At the sound of the evening bell, every fire in every home must be smothered. Not reduced. Not watched. Smothered. You kneel beside the hearth, picking up the ash shovel. The warmth reaches your face, a small, stubborn comfort against the growing cold of the room. For a moment, you hesitate. Just a moment. Because once the fire is gone, that's it. No more warmth. No more light. No more easy way to pretend the night isn't as deep as it is. But hesitation isn't part of the process. You begin. Carefully pushing ash over the glowing embers. They resist, at first. Flickering faintly. Holding on. But slowly, steadily, the glow dulls. The light fades. The warmth weakens. Until all that's left is a soft, dark mound that looks harmless enough. But still feels like something you should respect. You sit back. The room immediately feels different. Colder. Quieter. Smaller. A candle sits nearby. You light it. The flame is small. Unimpressive. Barely enough to push back the darkness gathering in the corners of the room. But it's something. And for now, something is enough. Outside, the village settles. You can hear it. Doors closing. Voices fading. The last movements of a day being carefully put away. Because once the bell rings, the world is expected to stop. There are reasons for this. Good ones, even. The buildings here, your home included, are made of wood, straw, and hope. Hope that nothing catches fire. Hope that no one forgets. Hope that one small mistake doesn't turn into something that spreads faster than anyone can stop it. Fire doesn't need much. A spark. A moment. A single person who thinks, it'll be fine. And suddenly, the entire village is no longer a village. Just ash. So the rule exists. Strict. Unforgiving. Because it has to be. Because someone, somewhere, didn't follow it once. And everyone remembers what happened next. You shift slightly, the floor creaking under your weight. The candle flickers. Your shadow moves along the wall, stretching and shrinking in ways that make the room feel less stable than it is. Or maybe that's just the darkness settling in. There's not much you can do now. No work. No wandering. No late-night decisions. The world outside your door has been paused. Not asleep. Just waiting. You try to occupy yourself. Adjusting something small. Checking something that doesn't need checking. Anything to feel like the day isn't completely out of your hands. But it is. You sit. Listening. The quiet here isn't empty. It's full. Of small sounds. The faint movement of wood settling. A distant cough. Something shifting in the walls that you choose not to think about. And beneath it all, the absence of everything else. You lie back slowly onto the straw. It's no more comfortable than it was this morning. Possibly less. The cold seeps in gradually, like it has nowhere else to be. You pull your clothing tighter around you. Not for warmth. For the idea of warmth. Somewhere outside, faint and far away, a dog barks. Then stops. As if it, too, remembered the rules. You stare at the ceiling. Or what you can see of it. The candlelight dances softly, never quite steady, never quite enough. It would be easy to feel trapped. Easy to feel controlled. Told when to wake. When to work. When to stop. When to sit in darkness and do nothing at all. But there's another way to look at it. A quieter way. The bell didn't just take your fire. It probably saved your home. Your neighbor's home. The entire fragile collection of wood and straw and human effort that makes up your world. Still. As the candle burns lower. And the cold settles deeper. And the darkness becomes something you can almost feel pressing in. It's hard not to think that safety and comfort are not always the same thing. The flame flickers again. Smaller now. Weaker. And without asking you. Without needing your permission. The night takes over. Morning arrives again. Not gently. Not kindly. Just, inevitably. The bell rings. Of course it does. It always does. And just like that, whatever thin, restless sleep you managed to gather during the night is quietly taken away from you. You open your eyes. The room looks exactly the same. It always does. Dim light. Rough walls. The faint memory of warmth long gone from the hearth. Your body feels heavier today. Not injured. Not sick. Just, tired in a way that doesn't fully leave. You sit up slowly. Your stomach notices before you do. A dull, persistent emptiness. Not sharp enough to alarm you. Just steady enough to remind you. It's there. Hunger, here, is not an emergency. It's a companion. One that follows you through the day, sits beside you while you work, and waits patiently while you pretend not to notice it. You stand, brushing away the same straw, the same dust, the same small inconveniences that never quite disappear. Across the room, something resembling food waits. If you're being generous. If you're being honest, it's more of a suggestion. A pot. A wooden bowl. Something inside it that used to be more recognizable. You move closer. Lean in slightly. It smells familiar. Which is not the same as good. You scoop a small portion. It's thick in places. Thin in others. A quiet blend of grains, maybe a vegetable or two that survived long enough to be included. You don't question it. You don't inspect it. You eat. It fills space. That's its purpose. Not to impress. Not to satisfy. Just, to exist between you and the next stretch of work. You finish quickly. Not because it's enjoyable. But because prolonging it doesn't improve anything. Your stomach settles slightly. Not full. Just, less empty. You step outside again. The village is already moving. It always is. The same patterns. The same routines. The same quiet understanding that today will look very much like yesterday, and tomorrow will follow closely behind. But today feels different. Subtly. Quietly. You notice it in the conversations. Shorter. More resigned. You notice it in the way people move past certain stalls, without stopping. Without even looking too closely. Because today is not just another day. It's Friday. And that changes things. Not everything. You'll still work. Still walk. Still exist within the same boundaries. But one thing, very specifically, is now unavailable. Meat. Not because there isn't any. Not because it's impossible. But because you are not allowed. You pause near the center of the village. A habit. A quiet hope. There's a stall you've passed many times. One that, on certain days, offers something different. Something richer. Something that smells like effort and reward. Today, it's quiet. Covered. Ignored. You already knew it would be. But part of you checked anyway. Because the idea of meat, even just the idea, has a way of staying with you. You turn slightly toward another stall. This one is busy. Not crowded. Just accepted. Fish. Rows of it. Some fresh. Some very much not. Some salted to the point where they've become more preservation than food. You step closer. Not eagerly. Just, inevitably. The smell reaches you first. Sharp. Persistent. Unapologetic. You look at the fish. They look back. In the way that fish do. Unblinking. Unconcerned with your preferences. This is what you'll eat today. And tomorrow. And many days after that. Because the rules say so. The church, distant, powerful, and very interested in how you live your life, has decided that certain days are for restraint. For discipline. For denying yourself things you would otherwise want. Fridays. Lent. Advent. Feast days that don't feel like feasts to you. All carefully arranged across the calendar like quiet reminders that your body is not entirely your own. You've heard the reasoning. Everyone has. It's about sacrifice. Spiritual focus. Honoring something larger than yourself. And maybe it is. But it's also practical. Animals, cows, pigs, livestock of all kinds, are not just food. They're tools. Resources. Investments in a future that's never quite guaranteed. Eat them too quickly. And there's nothing left to pull the plow. Nothing left to produce milk. Nothing left to sustain the slow, fragile system that keeps everything from falling apart. So the rules exist. Wrapped in religion. Enforced through habit. Accepted because questioning them doesn't make them disappear. You reach for a piece of fish. Exchange what little you can. And move away. It's heavier than it looks. Or maybe that's just the weight of knowing exactly how it's going to taste. You find a place to sit. Not comfortable. Just available. You take a bite. It's fish. Salty. Dry in some places. Strangely soft in others. A flavor that lingers longer than you'd like. You chew slowly. Not because you're savoring it. But because there's no reason to rush. Around you, others are doing the same. No one complains. Not out loud. Because complaining doesn't change the menu. A man nearby eats in silence, staring at nothing in particular. A child makes a face, then quickly stops when someone notices. A woman eats methodically, like she's done this so many times the experience no longer requires attention. This is normal. You take another bite. Then another. Your stomach accepts it. Reluctantly. But it does. And as you sit there, chewing, swallowing, pretending this is enough, you think, just briefly, about something else. Something warm. Something roasted. Something that doesn't come from water. The thought is vivid. Clear. Almost real. And then, just as quickly, it fades. Because wanting something you cannot have is a habit best kept small. You finish your meal. If that's what it was. Stand up. Brush your hands clean. Or as clean as they're going to get. The day continues. Work doesn't pause for hunger. Rules don't bend for preference. You move forward. Step by step. Task by task. And somewhere in the back of your mind, quiet but persistent, the idea remains. That somewhere. Not too far from here. In forests you're not allowed to enter freely. Something is moving. Alive. Unrestricted. Unaware of rules. A rabbit, perhaps. Small. Fast. And, for a moment, free. The thought doesn't leave you. It lingers. Not loudly. Not insistently. Just, present. A rabbit. It's a simple idea. Small. Almost harmless. The kind of thought that should pass through your mind and disappear without consequence. But it doesn't. Because hunger has a way of giving simple ideas, weight. You continue working. Your hands move the way they always do. Familiar motions. Repetitive. Efficient. But your attention drifts. Just slightly. Toward the edge of the village. Toward the place where the ground changes. Where the mud gives way to something softer. Quieter. Less controlled. The forest. You can see it from here. A dark line in the distance. Still. Patient. Unbothered by bells or rules or the careful structure of your day. It doesn't look threatening. Not really. Just trees. Just shadows. Just a place where things grow without asking permission. And somewhere inside it, something moves. You've seen them before. Quick flashes of motion between roots and low branches. A flicker of fur. A pause. Then gone. Rabbits. Small. Plentiful. Almost careless in the way they exist. You swallow. Not because you're eating. But because your body remembers what it's missing. You look away. Back to your work. Back to what you're supposed to be doing. Because the forest is not yours. It never has been. The land you stand on. The air you breathe. The path you walk every day. All of it belongs to someone else. Someone who doesn't need to think about hunger the way you do. The forest, especially, is protected. Not in the way that something fragile is protected. But in the way that something valuable is claimed. Game. That's what they call it. Animals that exist not for survival. But for sport. For display. For the quiet satisfaction of knowing that you can take something, simply because you're allowed to. You are not allowed. The rules are clear. They always are. You do not hunt in the Lord's forest. You do not set traps. You do not chase. You do not take. Even if you're hungry. Especially if you're hungry. Because hunger doesn't grant permission. It just makes the rules harder to follow. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. A man who set a snare. Just one. Carefully placed. Hoping no one would notice. They noticed. He wasn't taken away immediately. That's not how it works. First, there was the question. The quiet, measured kind. Did you place this? Then the answer. The wrong one. Or maybe just the honest one. After that, things became less quiet. A fine, too large to pay. A punishment, too severe to forget. And in some cases, something permanent. A hand. A future. A life reduced to a warning for others. You shift your weight slightly. The memory isn't yours. But it might as well be. Because the message is clear. The forest is not a solution. It's a boundary. Still. You glance toward it again. The trees haven't moved. They don't care about rules. They don't enforce them. They don't explain them. They simply exist. And inside them, the rabbit moves again. You see it this time. Just for a moment. A small shape near the edge. Still. Alert. It doesn't see you. Or maybe it does, and it doesn't care. To it, you're just another part of the landscape. Another slow-moving shape in a world that doesn't belong to either of you. It twitches slightly. Ears lifting. Body ready. You take a step. Without thinking. Just one. The ground changes under your foot. Softer. Quieter. Nothing happens. No shout. No warning. No sudden consequence. Just silence. You take another step. Closer now. Close enough to see the way it breathes. The small rise and fall. The stillness that isn't really still. Your hand tightens slightly. Empty. But not entirely. Because you could. The thought forms slowly. Carefully. Like it knows it shouldn't be there. You could catch it. Not easily. Not without effort. But it's possible. A quick movement. A bit of luck. And suddenly. The rules would feel very far away. You stand there. Balanced between two things. What is allowed? And what is needed? The rabbit shifts again. Just slightly. And in that moment. Something changes. Not outside. Not in the forest. Inside. A quiet understanding. That this isn't just about food. It's about risk. Because the forest doesn't stay silent forever. And rules, even when they're not visible, have a way of finding you. You exhale. Slowly. Take a step back. Then another. The ground returns to what it was. Firmer. More familiar. Safer. The rabbit doesn't follow. Of course it doesn't. It remains where it is. Free. Unclaimed. Untouched. For now. You turn away. Back toward the village. Back toward the life that's been laid out in careful, controlled lines. Behind you, the forest remains. Unchanged. Unconcerned. And somewhere inside it, the rabbit continues to move. Unaffected. Unaware. Of how close it came. To becoming something else. It starts with a rumor. It always does. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a few words, passed from one person to another, soft enough that they don't feel important. But they are. You hear it while working. Not directly. Never directly. A name. Someone you recognize. Not well. But enough. A man from the edge of the village. Quiet. Keeps to himself. Works hard. Or at least, worked. The word settles slowly. Like dust. Taken. Accused. Bred. You don't ask questions. No one really does. Because questions have a way of pulling attention toward you. And attention is rarely helpful. Still, the idea stays with you. Later, as the day stretches on and the bell marks another passing hour, you find yourself moving in the direction of the center of the village. Not quickly. Not obviously. Just, gradually. Other people are doing the same. Individually. Quietly. As if no one wants to admit they're all going to the same place. The space opens slightly. A gathering point. Not formal. But understood. And there. He is. Standing. Not tied. Not beaten. Just, waiting. He looks the same. Mostly. But there's something different. Stillness. Not calm. Not acceptance. Just, stillness. Beside him stands another figure. Dressed with intention. Not extravagance. Not wealth. Authority. You recognize it immediately. The way they stand. The way others avoid standing too close. The way space seems to arrange itself around them. There's a murmur. Low. Unsteady. The accusation isn't shouted. It doesn't need to be. It's known. A loaf of bread. Missing. Small. Insignificant. Except it isn't. Because here, nothing is just what it seems. A missing loaf isn't just hunger. It's theft. And theft requires judgment. But not the kind you might expect. There are no long arguments. No careful examination of evidence. No witnesses stepping forward with certainty. Instead, there's something else. Something older. Stranger. More certain. You've heard of it before. Of course you have. Everyone has. But hearing about it and seeing it are not the same. The figure beside him speaks. Calm. Measured. Explaining something that doesn't need explaining. If he is innocent, God will protect him. If he is guilty, God will not. It sounds simple. It isn't. You feel a shift in the crowd. Not fear. Not exactly. Something quieter. Recognition. Because this is how things are decided. Not by proof. Not by reason. But by ordeal. The method is chosen. Quietly. Without drama. Fire. You notice movement. Someone steps forward carrying something wrapped in cloth. Carefully. Respectfully. They unwrap it. And there it is. A piece of iron. Small enough to hold. Large enough to matter. It's placed into the fire. The same kind of fire you covered last night. The same kind you trust to keep you warm. Now, it's something else. You watch as the flames begin to take it. Slowly at first. Then more eagerly. The iron darkens. Then glows. Red. Not the kind of red worn on a sleeve. Not the kind that breaks a fashion rule. A deeper red. A warning. The man watches it too. He doesn't move. There's nowhere to go. The crowd is silent now. Completely. Even the small sounds, the shifting, the quiet murmurs, they fade. Because this part matters. The iron is removed. Carefully. With tools. It glows in the open air. Heat visible. Almost alive. The instruction is simple. He must carry it. Walk a few steps. Then release it. That's all. And after that, they will wait. Days. To see what happens to his hand. To see what God decides. He steps forward. Slowly. There's a moment. A pause. Not long. Just enough for the world to hold still. Then. He reaches out. His hand closes around the iron. The sound is subtle. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a faint contact. But you feel it anyway. He moves. One step. Another. Another. Then. He lets it fall. The iron hits the ground with a dull sound. Still glowing. Still dangerous. He doesn't cry out. Not loudly. But his body reacts. A slight tightening. A breath pulled in too quickly. Then stillness again. Someone steps forward. Wraps his hand. Carefully. As if what happens next is no longer their responsibility. Because it isn't. Now. They wait. 3 days. If the wound heals cleanly. He is innocent. If it festers. If it darkens. If it becomes what wounds often become in a world without cleanliness. He is guilty. You stand there. Watching. Trying to understand something that doesn't quite fit together. Because you know. Even without knowing. That wounds don't heal based on truth. They heal based on chance. On care. On things no one here can fully control. But that doesn't matter. Because the decision has already been placed somewhere else. Higher. Untouchable. Final. The crowd begins to disperse. Slowly. Quietly. There's nothing more to see. Not today. The rest will happen out of sight. In time. You turn away. The image stays with you. The iron. The hand. The silence. And the understanding. That here. Innocence isn't something you prove. It's something you survive. It starts with a rumor. It always does. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a few words, passed from one person to another, soft enough that they don't feel important. But they are. You hear it while working. Not directly. Never directly. A name. Someone you recognize. Not well. But enough. A man from the edge of the village. Quiet. Keeps to himself. Works hard. Or at least, worked. The word settles slowly. Like dust. Taken. Accused. Bread. You don't ask questions. No one really does. Because questions have a way of pulling attention toward you. And attention is rarely helpful. Still, the idea stays with you. Later, as the day stretches on and the bell marks another passing hour, you find yourself moving in the direction of the center of the village. Not quickly. Not obviously. Just, gradually. Other people are doing the same. Individually. Quietly. As if no one wants to admit they're all going to the same place. The space opens slightly. A gathering point. Not formal. But understood. And there. He is. Standing. Not tied. Not beaten. Just, waiting. He looks the same. Mostly. But there's something different. Stillness. Not calm. Not acceptance. Just, stillness. Beside him stands another figure. Dressed with intention. Not extravagance. Not wealth. Authority. You recognize it immediately. The way they stand. The way others avoid standing too close. The way space seems to arrange itself around them. There's a murmur. Low. Unsteady. The accusation isn't shouted. It doesn't need to be. It's known. A loaf of bread. Missing. Small. Insignificant. Except it isn't. Because here, nothing is just what it seems. A missing loaf isn't just hunger. It's theft. And theft requires judgment. But not the kind you might expect. There are no long arguments. No careful examination of evidence. No witnesses stepping forward with certainty. Instead, there's something else. Something older. Stranger. More, certain. You've heard of it before. Of course you have. Everyone has. But hearing about it, and seeing it, are not the same. The figure beside him speaks. Calm. Measured. Explaining something that doesn't need explaining. If he is innocent, God will protect him. If he is guilty, God will not. It sounds simple. It isn't. You feel a shift in the crowd. Not fear. Not exactly. Something quieter. Recognition. Because this is how things are decided. Not by proof. Not by reason. But by ordeal. The method is chosen. Quietly. Without drama. Fire. You notice movement. Someone steps forward carrying something wrapped in cloth. Carefully. Respectfully. They unwrap it. And there it is. A piece of iron. Small enough to hold. Large enough to matter. It's placed into the fire. The same kind of fire you covered last night. The same kind you trust to keep you warm. Now, it's something else. You watch as the flames begin to take it. Slowly at first. Then more eagerly. The iron darkens. Then glows. Red. Not the kind of red worn on a sleeve. Not the kind that breaks a fashion rule. A deeper red. A warning. The man watches it too. He doesn't move. There's nowhere to go. The crowd is silent now. Completely. Even the small sounds, the shifting, the quiet murmurs, they fade. Because this part matters. The iron is removed. Carefully. With tools. It glows in the open air. Heat visible. Almost alive. The instruction is simple. He must carry it. Walk a few steps. Then release it. That's all. And after that. They will wait. Days. To see what happens to his hand. To see what God decides. He steps forward. Slowly. There's a moment. A pause. Not long. Just enough for the world to hold still. Then. He reaches out. His hand closes around the iron. The sound is subtle. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a faint contact. But you feel it anyway. He moves. One step. Another. Another. Then. He lets it fall. The iron hits the ground with a dull sound. Still glowing. Still dangerous. He doesn't cry out. Not loudly. But his body reacts. A slight tightening. A breath pulled in too quickly. Then stillness again. Someone steps forward. Wraps his hand. Carefully. As if what happens next is no longer their responsibility. Because it isn't. Now. They wait. 3 days. If the wound heals cleanly. He is innocent. If it festers. If it darkens. If it becomes what wounds often become in a world without cleanliness. He is guilty. You stand there. Watching. Trying to understand something that doesn't quite fit together. Because you know. Even without knowing. That wounds don't heal based on truth. They heal based on chance. On care. On things no one here can fully control. But that doesn't matter. Because the decision has already been placed somewhere else. Higher. Untouchable. Final. The crowd begins to disperse. Slowly. Quietly. There's nothing more to see. Not today. The rest will happen out of sight. In time. You turn away. The image stays with you. The iron. The hand. The silence. And the understanding. That here. Innocence isn't something you prove. It's something you survive. The next morning feels different. Not lighter. Not easier. Just, quieter. The bell rings, as it always does. But today, it carries a different weight. Not urgency. Not instruction. Expectation. You open your eyes slowly. Your body still heavy from the days before. The work. The hunger. The thoughts you didn't quite finish thinking. For a moment, you stay still. Listening. The village sounds, subdued. No early clatter of tools. No hurried footsteps cutting through the mud. Just low movement. Soft voices. A kind of careful beginning. You sit up. The room hasn't changed. It never does. But something in the air has. Today is Sunday. You don't need to be reminded. The bell has already done that. You stand, slower than usual. There's no rush. Not today. Which feels strange. Because every other day has a rhythm. A push. A sense that if you don't move quickly enough, something will fall behind. But today, there's nowhere to fall behind to. You step outside. The light is soft. Almost hesitant. People are already moving, but not toward fields or tools. They're moving in one direction. The church. You join them. Of course you do. Not because you're eager. Not because you're especially rested. But because not going is noticed. And being noticed is rarely helpful. The path is familiar. You've walked it countless times. Today, it feels longer. Or maybe just slower. No one speaks much. When they do, it's quiet. Short. As if the day itself is asking for less noise. The church comes into view. It stands differently than everything else. Stronger. More certain. Stone instead of wood. Structure instead of suggestion. It doesn't bend. It doesn't shift. It simply exists. You step inside. The air changes immediately. Cooler. Heavier. The smell is different here. Wax. Stone. Something faintly sweet, and something faintly old. Light filters in through small windows. Soft. Scattered. People gather. Take their places. There's no comfort, exactly. Just space. Shared. You sit. Or stand. Or kneel. The positions change. The meaning stays the same. Time stretches. The words begin. Spoken in a language you don't fully understand. Latin. You've heard it all your life. Recognize the sounds. The rhythm. But the meaning remains just out of reach. Still, you listen. Or at least, you remain. Because this isn't about understanding. It's about being present. Being seen. Being part of something that doesn't require your input. Only your attendance. The sermon continues. Voices rise and fall. You feel your eyes grow heavier. Not from boredom. Not entirely. From stillness. From the sudden absence of movement. Of labor. Of urgency. Your body, used to constant motion, doesn't quite know what to do with rest. Because this is rest. Officially. No work. No fields. No repairs. No fixing the small things that are slowly becoming larger problems. The roof that leaks. The fence that leans. The tools that need attention. All of it waits. Because today, you are not allowed to work. Not supposed to. Not even a little. And if you do, someone will notice. They always do. A glance. A comment. A quiet word passed along. Until suddenly, you're standing here again. But not as part of the crowd. As the reason for it. So you don't. You sit. You listen. Or at least, you appear to. Time moves slowly here. Measured not by bells, but by patience. Eventually, it ends. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just, finished. People begin to rise. Move. The quiet returns. You step outside again. The day is still there. Waiting. But now. You have nothing to do with it. No tools in your hands. No tasks to complete. Just time. And that feels strange. You walk slowly. No destination. No urgency. Around you, others do the same. Some talk quietly. Some sit. Some simply stand. As if unsure what comes next. Because rest, when you're not used to it, isn't always comforting. It can feel empty. Like something is missing. You return home. Sit. Look around. The same walls. The same floor. The same small details you see every day. But never like this. Without purpose. You lie back. Not to sleep. Just, to be still. The silence settles in. Not complete. Never complete. But close enough. You think, briefly, about the rest this day is meant to provide. A pause. A break. A moment to recover. And maybe it does. In small ways. Quiet ones. But it also reminds you that even rest is not entirely yours. It's given. Scheduled. Expected. Just like everything else. The bell will ring again tomorrow. And when it does, this stillness will disappear. Replaced by movement. Work. Routine. So you stay where you are. For now. Letting the quiet stretch just a little longer. Because in a life shaped by rules, even rest comes with conditions. At first, you don't notice it. Not really. Because it has always been there. The sound. The bell. It doesn't arrive suddenly. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. Woven into everything. You wake to it. You work through it. You stop because of it. And somewhere along the way, you stop questioning it. The morning begins, as always, with a sound. Not light. Not warmth. Sound. A low, steady toll that rolls across the village like something slow and certain. You open your eyes. Not because you chose to. But because the bell has decided. You are awake now. Your body follows. It always does. You sit up. Stand. Move. And the strange thing is, you don't check the sky. You don't wonder how long you've slept. You don't ask what time it is. Because you already know. The bell told you. You step outside. Others are doing the same. Doors opening. Footsteps meeting the ground. All of it, timed. Not perfectly. Not precisely. But close enough that it feels intentional. Like the entire village is breathing together. In. Out. At the sound of something none of you control. There are more bells. Not just one. Each with its own purpose. Its own meaning. A language made entirely of sound. One for waking. One for beginning work. One for stopping. One for gathering. One for prayer. And one for ending the day entirely. You don't see them often. The bells themselves. High above. Suspended in towers built not just to hold them, but to make sure they are heard. Because being heard is the point. You begin your work. The motions are familiar. Your hands know what to do. Your body follows. But your mind is listening. Even when you don't realize it. Waiting. For the next sound. It comes, eventually. Another toll. Different. Not louder. Just, distinct. You pause. Not fully. Not dramatically. Just enough. Because that sound means something. It always does. Others pause too. Some look up. Some don't. But everyone adjusts. Slightly. As if an invisible hand has moved something just out of place. And you are all correcting for it. This is how time works for you. Not in numbers. Not in hours. But in moments defined by sound. You don't say, midday. You say, when the bell rang. You don't say, evening. You say, after the last bell. Time isn't something you measure. It's something you wait for. You move through your day like this. From sound to sound. Each one marking a shift. A beginning. An ending. A reminder. That your time is not entirely yours. At some point, you realize something. Not all at once. Not clearly. Just a quiet thought. That settles in slowly. You don't decide when to start. You don't decide when to stop. You don't decide when to rest. Or when to gather. Or when to return home. The bell decides. And you follow. Not because you're forced to. Not directly. But because everyone does. Because not following would mean standing still. While the rest of the world moves around you. And that kind of stillness is noticeable. You've seen it before. Someone missing a bell. Arriving late. Leaving early. It's never dramatic. Just, off. A step out of rhythm. And in a place where rhythm is everything. Being off matters. The day continues. Sound after sound. Each one shaping what comes next. Until eventually. The final bell arrives. It's slower. Heavier. More final. You feel it in your chest more than you hear it. A signal not just to stop. But to end. You turn. Head home. Without thinking. Without questioning. Because that's what the sound means. Inside, the quiet returns. But it's not the same quiet as before. Because now. You're waiting again. For tomorrow. For the next sound. The next instruction. The next moment when the world tells you. Who you are. Where you should be. And what you should be doing. You lie down. The straw shifts beneath you. The darkness settles in. And somewhere above. Silent now. The bells wait. Ready. Because in this world. You don't ask what time it is. You listen. And when the bell speaks. You obey. At some point. You notice it. Not suddenly. Not all at once. Just, gradually. A feeling. A layer. Something that doesn't quite leave. You shift slightly. Your clothes move with you. Heavy. Worn. Carrying the day, and the days before it. You pause. Take a breath. And there it is. Faint. Familiar. The smell. Not sharp enough to alarm you. Not strong enough to stand out. Just, constant. A quiet reminder that in this world. Clean is not the default. It's the exception. You rub your hands together. Dust shifts. Something darker beneath your nails remains. You could wash. In theory. Water exists. But water is not simple. It must be carried, lifted, poured, cold, always cold. And even then, it only does so much. You've heard stories, though, of places where water is not a burden, where it waits for you. Warm, still, inviting. Bathhouses. Places where people gather. Not to work. Not to pray. But to clean. You remember them. Not clearly. Just impressions. Steam rising slowly into the air. Voices echoing softly against wooden walls. The feeling of warmth soaking into your skin. Instead of being something you have to chase. It sounds impossible. Or maybe just unnecessary. Because now, they are closed. You walk past one sometimes. Or what used to be one. The door is shut. Firmly. Not abandoned. Not forgotten. Just denied. There was a time when people gathered there. Talked. Laughed. Washed away the dust and the weight and the quiet evidence of living too closely, too often, in too little space. But something changed. It always does. Illness. That's what they say. Something spreading. Through people. Through places. And the bathhouse became part of the story. Not because it caused it. Not exactly. But because it brought people together. Close. Too close. Warm water. Shared space. A place where boundaries softened. And things moved easily from one person to another. So the doors were closed. Not gently. Not temporarily. Just closed. You stop for a moment outside it. Not long. Just enough to look. To remember something you never fully experienced. The idea of being clean. Not just less dirty. But clean. You move on. Because standing still doesn't change anything. Back at your home, you consider it. Washing. A bucket sits nearby. Empty. It would need to be filled. Carried. The well is not far. But far enough. You imagine the process. The effort. The cold water hitting your skin. The brief discomfort. Followed by. What? A moment of feeling different. Before the world settles back onto you again. You sit. The thought fades. Because the effort doesn't quite match the result. And there are other things to save that effort for. Firewood. Food. Work. Cleanliness becomes optional. And then rare. You've heard other things, too. Whispers. Ideas. That too much washing is not good. That it opens the body. Weakens it. That the skin, left alone, knows how to protect itself. Whether that's true. Or just something people say to make sense of things. Doesn't really matter. Because the result is the same. Less water. Less washing. Less change. The nobles, of course, are different. They always are. They have space. Privacy. Resources. Baths brought to them. Water heated without question. Scents added. Oils. Ways to soften what you must simply endure. You don't see it. But you know it exists. Because in this world, comfort doesn't disappear. It just moves. You lie back slowly. The familiar weight returns. Clothes. Air. Everything settling into its place. You think, briefly, about what it would feel like to step into warm water. To sit. To let the day dissolve. It's a quiet thought. Gentle. And like many thoughts here, it passes. Because in the end, you don't need to be clean. You need to continue. And those are not the same thing. The room grows still. The air unchanged. The world outside moving in its quiet, structured way. And you remain. Exactly as you are. A part of it. Unwashed. Unbothered. And, in a way, perfectly normal. Hunger returns. It always does. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just, gradually. A quiet space inside you that never quite fills. You've eaten. Recently enough. But that doesn't seem to matter. Because here, eating isn't the same as being satisfied. You step outside again. The village moves as it always does. But your attention shifts. Not to the work. Not to the bells. To something else. Something further away. Across the open space. Beyond the familiar paths. There's a building that doesn't quite belong to your world. Larger. Stronger. Cleaner. Not because it's new. But because it's maintained. Cared for. Protected. It stands slightly elevated. Not enough to be obvious. But enough that you feel it. The difference. This is where they live. Not all of them. But enough. The ones who don't worry about fish days the same way you do. The ones who don't glance at the forest and weigh risk against hunger. You don't go closer. You don't need to. Because what happens there sometimes reaches you anyway. The smell. It arrives quietly. Carried on the air. Warm. Rich. Unmistakable. Meat. Not dried. Not salted into submission. Cooked. Properly. With time. With care. You stop. Just for a moment. Because your body reacts before your thoughts do. A slight shift. A quiet attention. Something inside you recognizing something it rarely experiences. You don't see the food. Not directly. But you imagine it. You've heard descriptions. Roasted birds with skin that cracks slightly when touched. Cuts of meat that don't fight back when you chew them. Dishes layered with flavor. Instead of necessity. And not just meat. Other things. White bread. Soft. Light. Not like yours. Not dense. Not dark. Not something that reminds you of effort with every bite. Spices. Faint hints of things that don't grow here. That travel. That cost. That signals something beyond survival. You swallow. Not because you're eating. But because your body remembers the idea of more. You've heard the rules. Of course you have. Not written where you can read them. But spoken. Repeated. Understood. Certain foods. Belong to certain people. Not officially. Not always clearly. But consistently. You eat what you're meant to eat. They eat what they're meant to eat. It's not just about access. It's about expectation. If you were to sit at that table. If you were to reach for something that isn't yours. It wouldn't just feel out of place. It would be. Because food, here, is more than nourishment. It's a signal. A quiet, constant reminder of where you stand. You look down at your hands. Rough. Worn. Hands that prepare simple things. Things that fill. But do not impress. And somewhere else. Hands that have never needed to work like yours. Are lifting food that has never needed to be questioned. You turn away. Not quickly. Just, naturally. Because standing there doesn't change anything. You walk back. Toward the familiar. Toward the expected. Later, you sit again. Another meal. If that's what it is. A bowl. Something inside it. Grains. Water. Maybe a trace of something else if the day has been kind. You eat. Slowly. Not because you're savoring it. But because this is the pace your body has learned. Around you, others do the same. No one speaks about it. No one needs to. Because everyone knows. There are meals that fill you. And there are meals that remind you. This is the second kind. You finish. Set the bowl aside. The hunger softens. But doesn't disappear. It never really does. You lean back slightly. The day continues. The bells will ring. The work will return. And somewhere, not too far away, another meal will be prepared. Different. Better. But not for you. And that's not an accident. It's the design. Because in this world, even what you eat knows your place. It starts with something small. It always does. A cough. Not loud. Not unusual. Just, there. You hear it somewhere behind you. Or beside you. It doesn't matter. Because once you notice it, you can't quite unnotice it. You keep moving. Of course you do. The day doesn't stop for a cough. Work continues. The bells still ring. Everything carries on. As if nothing has changed. But something has. Not outside. Inside. A quiet shift. A thought that wasn't there before. You glance around. People are still working. Still talking. But now, you're listening differently. Another cough. Someone clears their throat. A pause. Too long. Or maybe just long enough to notice. You look away. Because looking too closely feels like inviting something in. The word isn't spoken. Not directly. It doesn't need to be. Everyone knows it. Sickness. Not the kind that comes and goes. Not the kind you recover from easily. Something heavier. Something that moves. Quietly. From person to person. Through spaces. Through air. Through contact no one can fully track. You've heard stories. Of villages. That didn't recover. Of streets. That grew silent. Of doors. That stayed closed. You don't know how much of it is true. You don't want to. Because knowing doesn't help. But the rules do. Or at least. They try. You notice it more now. The distance. Subtle at first. A step back where there wasn't one before. A hesitation before standing too close. A quick glance when someone coughs again. The marketplace feels different. Still busy. Still moving. But thinner. More careful. You approach a stall. The person there watches you. Not suspicious. Just, aware. You exchange what you need. Quickly. No extra words. No lingering. Because lingering means proximity. And proximity has become something to think about. You move on. The air feels the same. But it doesn't feel safe in the same way. You pass someone. Close enough that your shoulders almost touch. You both adjust. Just slightly. Not enough to be obvious. But enough. The rules aren't always spoken. Sometimes they just appear. Formed from fear. From memory. From stories that may or may not be true. But feel real enough to follow. You hear something else now. Not a cough. A whisper. Low. Quick. A name. Someone else. Someone who isn't here today. You don't ask. You don't need to. Because absence is its own kind of answer. The church bells ring. Not the usual pattern. Not for work. Not for rest. Different. Slower. Heavier. You've heard this before. Once. Maybe twice. It means something. Something final. People pause. Not all at once. But enough. Heads lower slightly. Voices soften. No one says it. But everyone understands. You feel it again. That quiet shift. That awareness that something unseen is moving through the same world you are. And the rules begin to tighten. Not officially. Not written. But followed. Stay inside more. Avoid certain places. Watch others. Be careful. Always careful. You return home earlier than usual. Not because you were told to. But because it feels right. Or safer. Inside, the space feels smaller. More contained. As if the walls themselves are trying to hold something out. You sit. Listen. The outside world continues. But at a distance. Muted. You think about the cough. The whisper. The bell. And how something so small can change everything. The strange thing is, you don't know what to do. Not really. There's no clear instruction. No single rule to follow that makes it stop. So you do what everyone does. You adjust. Quietly. Carefully. You become more aware. More distant. More, still. Because in a world where danger is visible, you can avoid it. But when it isn't, all you can do is hope the rules are enough. You lie back slowly. The room feels heavier tonight. The silence. Less comfortable. Outside, somewhere far away. Another cough echoes faintly. Or maybe you imagined it. It doesn't matter. Because once the thought exists, it stays. And as you close your eyes, you understand something new. That in this world, it's not just laws that control you. It's fear. And fear doesn't need a bell to be heard. It happens in a small moment. So small. You almost miss it. You're sitting. Not working. Not moving much. Just, existing. The day has slowed. The air is still. And someone nearby says something. Quietly. Almost like a joke. Something about the priest. Not loud. Not cruel. Just, slightly off. A comment about a hat. Or a sermon. Or the way something was said instead of what was said. You hear it. And without meaning to, you react. A small sound. A breath that turns into something closer to a laugh. It escapes before you can stop it. And just like that, the moment changes. It's not immediate. No one turns suddenly. No one points. But something shifts. The air tightens. Not visibly. Just enough that you feel it. You stop. Of course you do. Because you recognize that feeling. The same one you felt near the forest. The same one during the ordeal. That quiet awareness that you may have stepped just slightly outside the line. You glance around. Carefully. People are still where they were. still doing what they were doing. But now, there's a distance. Subtle. A space that wasn't there before. The person who spoke is suddenly very interested in something else. Looking away. Busy. As if the words never happened. You understand why. Because here, words are not just sounds. They matter. The church is not just a place you go. It's not just a building. Or a routine. It's something larger. Something that exists in every part of your life. It owns land. It shapes rules. It defines what is right. And what is not. And more than that. It listens. Not always directly. Not always clearly. But enough. A comment. A joke. A question. These things don't disappear once they're spoken. They move. Quietly. From one person to another. Changing slightly each time. Until they reach someone. Who decides they matter. You lower your gaze. Not out of guilt. But out of understanding. Because the line here is not always visible. You can follow every rule. Attend every mass. Speak when spoken to. Stay within your place. And still. Say something. That becomes something else. The word for it is simple. Heresy. It sounds distant. Formal. Like something that happens to other people. Until it doesn't. You've heard stories. Of people who questioned too much. Or spoke too freely. Or simply, said the wrong thing in the wrong moment. At first, it's small. A warning. A correction. A suggestion to be more careful. But sometimes. It grows. A label. Quietly placed. Not loudly announced. And once it's there. It doesn't leave easily. People begin to see you differently. Speak to you less. Stand a little further away. Not because they know something. But because they don't want to be part of it. And eventually. Someone with authority notices. Not immediately. But inevitably. And when they do. The questions begin. Not angry. Not rushed. Just, certain. What did you mean? It sounds simple. But it isn't. Because meaning can change. And once you're explaining, you're already in a place you didn't intend to be. You shift slightly. The memory of that small moment's still there. The almost laugh. The reaction you didn't plan. You say nothing now. Of course you don't. Because silence is safer. Around you, the world continues. But you feel it differently. The weight of words. The shape of thoughts. The careful balance between what you think and what you allow yourself to say. You realize something. Slowly. It's not just your actions that are guided. It's your voice. And maybe even your thoughts. Because when something holds this much power, it doesn't just shape what you do. It shapes what feels possible to say. You look up briefly. Toward the church. Standing as it always does. Unmoving. Certain. And you understand. That in this world. Faith is not just belief. It's structure. It's control. And sometimes. It's silence. You lower your gaze again. The moment passes. Or at least. It seems to. But the awareness remains. And from now on. You choose your words. Just a little more carefully. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no single moment. Where everything stops. Instead. It's gradual. A slowing. A presence that fades. Not suddenly. But piece by piece. You notice it in small ways. A door that stays closed longer than usual. A voice you haven't heard today. A space. Where someone should be. No one says it directly. Not at first. Because saying it makes it real. But eventually, the word appears. Quietly. Passed from one person to another. Like everything else. Gone. You don't ask how. You don't ask why. Because the answers rarely change anything. You move through your day. But something is different. Subtle. A gap in the rhythm. Later. The bell rings. Not the usual pattern. Not for work. Not for rest. Slower. Heavier. You recognize it now. You always do. It's not just a sound. It's an announcement. The village gathers. Not quickly. Not urgently. Just, inevitably. You follow. Because this, too, is part of the structure. The space is familiar. But it feels different. Quieter. More contained. There's no spectacle. No dramatic display. Just a simple presence. A shape. Covered. You stand among others. Close. But not too close. No one speaks much. What would you say? Life here doesn't leave much room for reflection. Or maybe it does. Just not the kind you expect. The ceremony begins. Words are spoken. Again, in a language you don't fully understand. But the meaning is clear enough. There is an order to this. A process. Something that must be followed. Because even in death, there are rules. Where you are placed. How you are remembered. What space you are allowed to take. Even after you're gone. You've seen it before. The differences. Subtle. But undeniable. Some are buried close. Near the church. Stone markers. Names. A place where people will return. Remember. Others are placed further away. Simpler. Less permanent. Not forgotten. But not preserved. And then there are those who are not given even that. You've heard the stories. Whispers. Of people who died outside the rules. Who said the wrong things. Believed the wrong things. Or were simply judged. They are not brought here. Not into the ground that has been blessed. They are placed elsewhere. Beyond the edges. Where the structure fades. Because even in death, there are boundaries. You look at the ground. At the space prepared. At the careful, measured way everything is done. There is comfort in it. A kind of order. Even if that order is not equal. The earth is moved. Slowly. Deliberately. The moment stretches. Not long. But long enough to feel. You don't think about your own end. Not directly. But the thought is there. Quiet. Persistent. That one day. This will be your place. Your moment. Your position within the same system. That has shaped everything else. You wonder, briefly. Where you will be. Not in a dramatic way. Not with fear. Just, curiosity. Close. Far. Marked. Or not. The thought doesn't stay long. It doesn't need to. Because the answer is already written somewhere. Not for you to see. But for others to follow. The ceremony ends. Not suddenly. Just, finished. People begin to leave. Quietly. Returning to their places. Their roles. Their routines. You do the same. The bell will ring again. The work will continue. The structure will remain. Because life here doesn't stop. Not even for death. You walk back slowly. The path the same. The air unchanged. And yet, something lingers. A quiet understanding. That the rules you follow now don't end when you do. They continue. In how you are remembered. In where you are placed. In how much space you are allowed to take. Even after you're gone. You step inside. The room is as it always is. Still. Familiar. You sit. Listen. The silence feels different now. Not heavier. Just deeper. And as the day slowly returns to its usual rhythm, you understand something. That in this world, freedom isn't something you find at the end. It's something that was never fully offered to begin with. By now, you've stopped noticing it. Not completely. But enough. The rules. They no longer feel like rules. They feel like the shape of things. The way the day unfolds. The way the night settles. The way everything fits together. You wake when the bell tells you. You rise. Not because you are ready. But because the sound has already decided for you. You dress. In what you are allowed to wear. Not choosing. Just continuing. You step outside. Into a world that already knows your place. And expects you to remain in it. You work. Not until you are finished. But until the next sound arrives. And tells you that you are. You eat. Not what you want. But what is permitted. What is available. What remains after everything else has been decided. You avoid. The forest. The risk. The quiet temptation of something just beyond reach. You speak. Carefully. Measuring words before they leave you. Understanding that once they do, they no longer belong to you. You rest. When you are told to rest. Not because your body asked for it. But because the day has been shaped to include it. You listen. Always listening. For the next bell. The next signal. The next moment where something outside of you moves you forward. And slowly, without realizing it, you become part of it. Not resisting. Not questioning. Just aligning. Because resistance requires energy. And energy is already spoken for. You lie down again. The same straw. The same room. The same quiet presence of everything you've carried through the day. And as you settle in, you begin to notice something else. Not the rules themselves. But the rhythm they create. Predictable. Steady. Unchanging. There is comfort in that. Even if it isn't chosen. You know what comes next. Even before it happens. The bell will ring. You will wake. You will move through the same patterns. The same boundaries. The same quiet structure that holds everything in place. And in that repetition, there is something almost calming. No decisions to make. No uncertainty about what comes next. Just a path. Already laid out. Already followed. Already understood. Your breathing slows. The room fades slightly. The edges of things becoming softer. Less defined. And the world outside continues. The bells still stand. Silent for now. Waiting. The forest still exists. Unchanged. The church still rises. Certain. The rules remain. Unwritten in your hands. But present in everything you do. And you. You rest inside it all. Not separate. Not outside. But within. A part of the system. A part of the rhythm. A part of the quiet, steady pattern. That shapes every moment. Your eyes close. The last sounds fade. And somewhere in the distance. Not loud. Not urgent. Just steady. The bell waits. Ready. To begin again. The bell returns. Soft at first. Then steady. Then unavoidable. And just like that. The day begins again. You wake. Not suddenly. Not fully. Just enough to follow. Because the rhythm continues. It always does. You sit up. The same room. The same air. But something in the village feels different today. Not urgent. Not tense. Just expectant. You notice it outside. In the way people speak. In the way they gather. Small groups. Quiet conversations. And then. A word. Not whispered. Not hidden. Just shared. A marriage. You hear the names. Recognize one. Maybe both. Not closely. But enough. Enough to understand what it means. Two lives. Becoming one. That's how it's described. Simple. Clean. But like everything here. It's more structured than that. You move closer. Not directly. Just enough to observe. Because this is not just a personal moment. It's a public one. A legal one. A controlled one. The couple stands together. Not touching. Not quite. Just near. Their expressions are calm. Or carefully calm. Because this moment is not entirely theirs. Marriage, here, is not just about love. Not even mostly about love. It's about permission. Approval. Arrangement. You've heard how it works. Families involved. Discussions held. Not in open spaces. But behind doors. Where decisions are made quietly. And then presented as something natural. Consent exists. But it moves differently. Shaped by expectation. By need. By what makes sense. For more than just the two people standing here. The church stands nearby. Of course it does. Because this, too, falls under its gaze. Its approval. Its structure. Words are spoken. Familiar. Measured. Not entirely understood. But fully accepted. You watch. Not with excitement. Not with envy. Just awareness. Because this moment. This joining. Is also a boundary. A shift from one role. To another. From individual. To something else. And like everything else here. It comes with rules. Who you can marry. Who you cannot. How close you are. How far you must be. Lines drawn not just by people. But by something older. Something formal. And once it is done. It is done. There is no quiet stepping away. No easy change. It becomes part of your place. Part of your identity. Part of the structure that shapes everything else. The ceremony ends. Not suddenly. Just, complete. People begin to move again. Soft voices returning. The moment dissolving into memory. You step back. Return to your place in the flow of the day. But something stays with you. The understanding that even something as personal as love is not entirely free. It is guided, approved, allowed. Just like everything else. You continue walking. The village returns to its rhythm. The bells will ring again. The work will resume. And somewhere behind you, two lives begin something new. Not outside the system, but within it. Carefully. Quietly. Exactly as intended. You notice the crowd first. Not large. Not loud. Just, gathered. In a way that feels intentional. People standing a little closer than usual. Not speaking much. Looking. You weren't heading there. Not exactly. But your steps shift. Slightly. Because gatherings mean something. They always do. You move closer. Slowly. No one stops you. No one invites you. You simply become part of it. At the center. There's a structure. Simple. Wooden. Familiar. You've seen it before. From a distance. The stalks. They don't look threatening. Not like a weapon. Not like something designed to harm. Just, wood. Hinged. Positioned. Waiting. Someone is already there. You recognize them. Again, not closely. But enough. A face you've passed before. A presence that was once just part of the background. Now. You walk. The village resumes its rhythm. The bells will ring again. The day will continue. But something stays with you. Not fear. Not exactly. Just, awareness. That here. You are always visible. Even when you think you are not. And that sometimes. The greatest punishment. Is simply being seen. At the wrong moment. You think about leaving. Not seriously. Not completely. Just, as a thought. A quiet one. It comes to you while walking the same path. The same ground beneath your feet. The same turns. The same edges of the village that never quite change. You've walked these paths so many times. They no longer feel like directions. They feel like boundaries. At the far edge. Where the houses thin. And the fields stretch out just a little wider. You slow down. Not because you're tired. But because this is where something shifts. The village ends here. Not with a wall. Not with a gate. Just, less. Fewer signs of people. More space. And beyond that. The road. You've seen it before. Of course you have. A narrow line cutting through the land. Leading somewhere. Somewhere that is not here. You stand for a moment. Looking at it. Not stepping onto it. Just, observing. Because leaving. Is not as simple as walking forward. There are no signs telling you not to go. No guard standing in your way. But there are rules. Always rules. Some are spoken. You've heard them. Permissions. Reasons. Times when leaving is allowed. And times when it is not. Others are not spoken at all. But they are understood just the same. Who you are. What you do. What is expected of you. All of it ties you here. The land is not just land. It belongs to someone. And by extension. So do you. Not entirely. Not completely. But enough. Enough that leaving. Without reason. Without approval. Becomes something more than a simple choice. You imagine it anyway. Walking forward. Step after step. The village behind you growing smaller. The sounds fading. The bells no longer reaching you. It feels quiet, peaceful, but also uncertain. Because beyond this place, you don't know the rules. You don't know the people. You don't know where you would go, or how you would be received when you arrived. The road connects places, but it also separates them. Each place with its own structure, its own expectations, its own way of deciding who belongs. You take a small step forward. Just one. Onto the edge of the road. Nothing happens. No sound. No signal. And yet, you feel it. That quiet sense. That you are somewhere you are not meant to stay. Not forbidden. Just outside. You step back. Not quickly. Not out of fear. Just naturally. Because returning feels easier. The village waits. Familiar. Structured. Known. You turn. Walk back the way you came. The ground feeling more certain beneath your feet. Around you, life continues. People move. Work happens. Everything in its place. And you understand something. Freedom here is not about distance. It's about belonging. And belonging comes with limits. The road remains behind you. Stretching out. Unchanged. Waiting. But you don't follow it. Because in this world, leaving is not just a step. It's a decision. That must first be allowed. And so you remain. Exactly where you are meant to be. It begins before you remember. Before thoughts. Before choices. Before you even understand that there is a world shaping you. You are small. Not just in size, but in awareness. The room exists. The voices exist. But they don't yet carry meaning. Just sound. Warmth. Movement. Hands lift you. Not gently. Not harshly. Just, practically. Because here, even care is shaped by necessity. You are fed. Kept warm when possible. Watched. But not constantly. Because there is always something else to do. You grow. Not suddenly. But steadily. And with that growth comes expectation. At first, it's small. Simple things. Stay close. Don't wander. Listen when called. You learn quickly. Not because you're taught carefully, but because the world doesn't wait.